Hey there, Seahawks. It's Miss Adams, and in this video, we're going to talk about factoring a trinomial when we have a leading coefficient. All right, so first you want to make sure that you start with a trinomial, all right, and it's in standard form, so ax squared plus bx plus c. It doesn't have to necessarily be x squared and x. It could be like x to the fourth and x squared, but you want to have it as close to standard form as possible. All right, first step, you're going to multiply the first term times the last term. So 3 times 10, my first term is 3, my last term is 10. And then you're going to find factors that multiply to give you that product and add to make the middle term. All right, so that you're going to do like some side work basically for that. Then you're going to break apart the middle term using the factors that worked, and then you're going to use group and factor. All right, so I'm going to multiply the first term by the last term, so it's going to give me 30. So now I want to think of what are the numbers that multiply to give me 30? Well, 1 times 30 makes 30, 2 times 15 makes 30, 3 times 10 makes 30, 5 times 6 makes 30, and then 6 times 5, but I already have 5 times 6, so I'm not going to do that. All right, but I want them to multiply to give me positive 30, but add to make negative 11. So a negative times a negative will make a positive, and then a negative plus a negative will make a more negative number. So I'm going to use 5 and 6, but they're both going to be negatives. So I'm going to break up the negative 11, and this is going to be a minus 5x and a minus 6x. And then you want to look at the numbers that you have. So on the first term, I have 3x squared. So I probably want to put the 6 with that. So I'm going to put the 6x with the 3x squared. And then I'm going to put the 5, the negative 5x, with the 10. Now it doesn't actually matter if you put them in the other order. You'll still end up with the same answer in the end. Okay, so now I have 4 terms. And I'm going to group and factor. So I'm going to group the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. In the first group, I can pull out a 3x. So when I pull out that 3x, I'm going to divide everything in the first group by 3x. And that's going to leave me with x minus 2. In the next group, I can pull out a negative 5, which means I'm going to divide everything in the second group by negative 5. And that's going to leave me with x minus 2. So my 2 factors are 3x minus 5 and x minus 2. And then you always want to check and make sure that there's nothing else you can pull out. Okay, and that's it. All right, problem 1. I have 8y squared minus 10y minus 3. So it doesn't look like there's any common factors that I can pull out from the beginning. So I'm going to do the first term times the last term. That gives me negative 24. So I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to make negative 24 and add to make negative 10. So I'm going to list all the factors of 24. 1 times 24, 2 and 12 make 24, 3 and 8 make 24, 4 and 6 make 24, and then 6 and 4, but I already have 4 and 6, so that's where I'll stop. Now, I know that when I multiply them, I want it to be a negative, so one of the terms is going to have to be a negative, and the other term is going to have to be a positive. And I want them to add together to make negative 10. So if I use the 2 and the 12, and I make the 12 a negative, positive 2 times negative 12 will multiply to make negative 24, and positive 2 plus negative 12 will give me negative 10. So I'm going to break apart the negative 10y using the positive 2y and the negative 12y. Then I'm going to bring the other pieces down. So I'm going to bring down the 8y squared, and I'm going to bring down the minus 3. So I split that middle term up into 2y and negative 12y. All right. Then I'm going to group and factor. In the first group, I can pull out a 2y. That's going to leave me with 4y plus 1. And in the next group, I can pull out a negative 3. Negative 3 goes into negative 12 4 times, so that's a 4y. Negative 3 goes into negative 3 once. Now my factors are 2y minus 3 and 4y plus 1. All right, number 2. I'm going to do the first term times the last term. That's going to give me negative 18. I'm going to list all the different ways I can make 18. And I need them to add together to give me positive 3, but multiply to give me negative 18. So one of the pieces is going to have to be negative. If I make the 3 negative and the 6 positive, that will add to give me positive 3 and multiply to give me negative 18. So I'm going to split apart that middle term using negative 3 and 6. And since the middle term has an m, when I split it apart, both pieces are going to get an m. I'm going to bring everything else down. Now I have 4 terms. I'm going to group and factor. I'm going to group the first 2 terms and the second 2 terms. In the first group, I can pull out a 3m. That's going to leave me with 3m minus 1. In the next group, I can pull out a 2, and that's going to leave me with 3m minus 1. So my factors are 3m plus 2 and 3m minus 1. Now, if you got a question and asked you to find the roots or the solutions or the zeros, then you would take each factor and you would set it equal to 0, and then you would solve for m. All right. Number 3, I'm going to do the first term times the last term, which is 30. I'm going to list all the factors of 30. 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 5 and 6. I need to find 2 numbers that multiply to make 30, but add to make negative 17. So they're both going to have to be negatives if they multiply to give me a positive, but add to make a negative. So if negative 2 and negative 15 is used, that will work. So I'm going to break apart the negative 17 into negative 2m and negative 15m. I'm going to bring everything else down. I have 4 terms, so I'm going to group and factor. In the first group, I can pull out an m. If I pull out the m, that's going to leave me with 5m minus 2. In the second group, I can pull out a 3, a negative 3. So I'm going to pull out a negative 3. That's going to give me with positive 5m minus 2. And now my factors are m minus 3 and 5m minus 2. All right. Number 4, I'm going to do the first term times the last term. That's going to give me 6. I'm going to list the factors of 6. So 1 times 6, 2 times 3, and that's it. So I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to make 6, but add to make 5. Well, 2 and 3 will work. So I'm going to break 5x into 2x and 3x. All right, I'm going to put the 2x on that side and the 3x on that side. And if you switch up the order, that's fine. Your work will look a little different, but your answer will still be the same. All right, bring everything else down. Now I have 4 terms. I'm going to group and factor. In the first group, I can pull out a 2x. That's going to leave me with x plus 1. And in the next group, I can pull out a 3. That's going to leave me with x plus 1. So my factors are 2x plus 3 and x plus 1. All right, number 5. I'm going to multiply the first term times the last term. Now, if you want, you could go ahead and see if there is a greatest common factor that you could pull out first. So it does look like 5 works, and maybe, just 5. So I could pull out a 5 from the beginning, but I'm going to show you what it looks like if you don't do it at the beginning. All right, so if you do first term times the last term, that's going to give you 350. And I'm going to list all the different ways I could get 350. Well, 1 times 350, 2 times 175, 5 times 70. And so if you pull out the greatest common factor first, you'll get numbers that are going to maybe be a little bit easier to work with. But I'm going to show you this way, and I'll show you in class how to pull out the GCF first, what that looks like. All right, so I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to make 350 but add to make 75. Well, 5 and 7 will make 75, so I can break that up into 5K and 70K. I'm going to put the 70 with the 10 and the 5 with the 35. So bring everything else down. I have 4 terms. I'm going to go ahead and group and factor. So when I group and factor, in the first group I can pull out a 10k. That's going to leave me with k plus 7. And in the next group, I can pull out a 5. That's going to leave me with k plus 7. So that gives me these factors, 10k plus 5 and k plus 7. And then in the first group, if you look, you have 10k plus 5. Well, in that group, I can still pull out a 5 because 5 goes into 10 and 5 also goes into 5. So if I pull out that 5, that would leave me with 2k plus 1, and then bring down my other factor, which is k plus 7. All right, and if you pulled out that 5 in the beginning, you would just have that 5 out there, and you just make sure you keep bringing that down as you do your work. All right, this one, I have 12x to the third plus 2x squared minus 2x. So here you could pull out a 2x from the very beginning. Okay. I'm going to do it the way we just did it, just to keep it consistent. So 12 times negative 2 gives me negative 24. And then I'm going to list the factors. So 1 times 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give me negative 24, but add to give me positive 2. So one of the terms is going to have to be negative. It's going to be the smaller one. So negative 4 and positive 6 will make 2. I'm going to break apart the middle term. I'm going to put the negative 4x squared with the 12 and a positive 6x squared with the 2. Bring down my end pieces. Now I have 4 terms. I can group and factor. In the first group, I can pull out a 4x squared. That's going to leave me with 3x minus 1. And in the next group, I can pull out a 2x. That's going to leave me with 3x minus 1. So my factors are 4x squared plus 2x and 3x minus 1. Now you'll notice in that first group, I have a 4 and a 2, and I also still have some x's. So there's some stuff I can factor out. Well, I can pull a 2 and an x out of that group. If I pull out the 2x, that leaves me with 2x plus 1. And then there's nothing to pull out of the other group, so I'll just bring that one down. So this one has 3 factors, 2x, 2x plus 1, and 3x minus 1. All right, that's it.